Chocobo GP. So if you don't know, this is like I guess you could say kind of Mario Kart clone. So it does very heavily rely on drift mechanics. You have items you're picking up in the environment, things like that. And kind of the key differences between this and like a Mario Kart is A, it's Final Fantasy, right? And B, you have a magicite system for the items you pick up on the course. So you'll pick up an item, you get like fire, right? But then you can go and you can pick up an egg, which is like the egg is like the item box thing. So you can pick up an egg of the same color and it'll level up that spell in your inventory. So we become like a fire spell, level 2 fire essentially. And if you go and pick up another red egg, then it becomes a Firaga, so it's like a more powerful version of that spell. So it creates some interesting dynamic with, like, you know, knowing when you want to use certain spells and at what level, because the level 1 ones are definitely, you know, useful, but they can be a lot more challenging to use because you have to like be accurate with them. Like the fire spell just fires straight forward, kind of like a green shell in some ways, but it doesn't like ricochet off a wall, so you kind of have one shot and that's it. So there's a lot of different spells in the game with fire. There's ice, you know, water, thunder, all those kind of things, and they all have like different effects. Like the thunder one, if there's the player you hit gets like a tag on them, and then if there's anyone around them for a specific period of time, everybody within that range around them will get hit. So if you like throw a thunder into a group of people and they all kind of stick around with each other, eventually that thunder will hit everybody in the group, kind of thing. So there's like a lot of interesting uses for the spells. You can also get different effects by throwing them backwards too, so it's not just always just you throw something backwards and it travels in a straight line behind you, kind of thing. It seems like sometimes their behavior changes depending on what you do with them. But yeah, so it's like a really interesting system because you do have to make a lot of decisions about, am I going to use this now? Am I going to wait till this chapter powers up? You know, do I want to, you know, take the time to level this up in my inventory and forfeit the ability to get other abilities? And you know, what's really important depending on what position I'm in right now, right? It also means there's a lot more flexibility, I feel like, in the ability to do like defensive spells, because you have 3 magicite slots essentially. And then so if you're leveling up a spell, it's eventually, once it gets to level 3, occupies all of those magicite slots. However, say you get like a 2 different eggs, 2 different colors, you can get like 2 different spells with like the level 1 version of the spell. So you can have like 3 spells in total queued up, but they're all the level 1 versions, right? So you can kind of have this like interesting diversity of things in your inventory, and then like, you know, you might want to utilize ones to get some further up. So if you're in first place, you might want to keep the barrier, you know, spell in your next slot, so you can use that as soon as something starts coming in at you. When you're in last space, you know, you kind of want to just get that barrier out of your inventory as soon as possible to get like a different spell and things like that. So, and then in addition to those spells, you also have character-specific power-ups. And these are not balanced very well, but they do make it so each character has like their own unique gimmick, whether that be like a energy beam they shoot in front of them in some way that attacks everybody in front of them, makes an AoE effect around the player so they'll affect enemies around them, you know, shoot something backwards or make them speed up and things like that. So like every character has their own way they go around this. So like Shiva, she just basically has an ice like field around her while she's driving. So for like, you know, 3 to 5 seconds, you know, if anybody gets close to Shiva, they freeze and they have to fall behind, or if she gets close to them, you know. And it's like, it's pretty much track wide, honestly. So it's like not even just like she has to drive up to him. It's just like anyone within the perimeter, basically. And then you have like Cactar. He has a similar thing where like if anybody gets really close to him, he'll do like 1,000 needles attack and like knock them back, kind of thing. And then you have like this one Chocobo, it's like a girl Chocobo, I forget her name, but she like sets up rings up the course, and that like if she drives through the ring, she gets like not only a speed boost but also invulnerability and things like that. But it's like things like that you know, that ring one, it's interesting because other players can use those rings. As far as I can tell, they don't get the full benefit that the girl does, but the other characters can still go through that ring, and it seems like it does boost their speed. But then there's other characters who kind of have a very similar speed boost effect, but it doesn't place the rings on the course, so like other characters can't get the benefit of that. So it's like a lot of weird like kind of trade-offs you have, and some of them are significantly worse than others. They also have like different speed boosts they'll do for characters. Some characters have a really aggressive spell, yet it also gives them a big speed boost along with their using that spell, where other characters don't have that big speed boost with it. So they have an aggressive spell, but they just kind of stay where they are. And I feel like there's just at some point you kind of start narrowing down who has the best specials, and you focus on them. They do have like different carts too, so you can kind of like adjust the stats depending on what you, well, not really adjust the stats, but you know, you can choose between 3 different options. Really, it's a very Snowboard Kids kind of like balance, speed, and grip. So you can kind of choose a character who maybe is like more of a heavy style and then give them a cart that's more of a grip style, and so it makes them a little easier to play. I did that for a couple characters because I'm not really good at heavy characters in racing games, but it did make them a bit more manageable for me. And then it made some of the characters who might be more like the beginner characters who are a lot more, you know, slower but have a lot more control. It gave them more viability because you could increase their speed as well by putting them in a speed car kind of thing. So I thought it was like a really cool game overall, and I think that the customization, while not balanced very well, you know, you can kind of do whatever you want with it, and so it's not really a big deal. One thing I didn't mention as well is there's a warp spell in the game that I really like a lot. This is one of the items you get, and the warp spell is pretty cool because like you drop a warp down in front of you and it lets you basically jump ahead a little while, which is kind of neat, but it's more or less just like a different form of a mushroom, right? Which there is like a speed boost in this game already. But what's cool about it is it drops the portal down. Other players can use that portal, so they can also warp behind you. However, the exit portal is also placed somewhere. So you can kind of like do some fun things with that where you like put the exit portal like, or you time it so the exit portal like lands at like a bottleneck, so it's like kind of hard to dodge. But then you can also put the entrance portal in like a really inconvenient spot. So like what I would do is like if I got a portal, I would drive off the track and into like a fence basically. And you know, to me, like I'm losing a tiny bit of speed, but the second I'm putting that warp down, I'm warping off, right? So I'm out of that area. But then if somebody hits the exit portal, they get warped back to that really inconvenient location where they're just like stuck facing a fence in the grass kind of thing. So there's like some really cool things that you can do with it. And I just feel like those kind of options are not really things you see much in Mario Kart or something like that, right? Though I will say like the track design of this game is significantly worse than a Mario Kart game. The later tracks in the game are actually very cool. I like them a lot. But the early tracks in the game feel just too simple, and there's a lot of them, and they reuse them a lot too. When you're going through like there's like a story mode and a Grand Prix mode, and when you do go through the story mode, it is almost entirely made up of the short tracks, which is unfortunate. And then the Grand Prix mode, the first half of the Grand Prix mode, it mixes those short tracks in. It does start to mix in some of the longer tracks, like maybe towards the middle of the Grand Prix mode. There's like 12 cups basically in total. So you spend a lot of time in this game on those kind of lesser tracks, and they reuse a lot of the same like, you know, tracks and then build upon them essentially. So some of the more complicated tracks are basically just expanded versions of the shorter tracks, or the other way you can look at it is shorter tracks are compressed down versions of some of the more complicated tracks, things like that. And so I just feel like it creates this imbalance of these like super short tracks that really kind of flood the initial part of the game, and those short tracks are not very interesting, unfortunately, where the later tracks are really interesting. And you know, I understand why this happens kind of with these kind of games, restricting the amount of assets you have to create and getting like the most mileage out of it. And I think there's always this feeling that we have to have like the baby tracks initially so the player gets used to the game, right? But I think what Mario Kart does well, and I don't know why or how it does this well, all those like baby tracks in Mario Kart still feel interesting to race on, even when you go back to them, and they feel like they make a small section of the catalog. So like Luigi's Raceway is still kind of fun, even though it's a simpler track. This game, like, it feels like every course for a while is all just Luigi's Raceway kind of thing, slightly tweaked kind of thing. So I think the track design could be a lot better. The tracks are also, because they're short, it's still only 3 laps. A lot of the races only last anywhere between like 50 seconds to 2 minutes, which feels too short, especially when you're going through story mode. I haven't talked about story mode much. I'll go into it, but essentially when you're going through these cutscenes and stuff, you get spit out into a race, do a race for like 50 seconds, and then you go into a pretty lengthy cutscene again, which is, you know, a problem specific to story mode. If you're playing online or you're playing in the Grand Prix, like whatever, you just get kicked off to the next race. Just means the Grand Prix itself is fairly short, but I feel like there's just too many short tracks in general with that. So the story mode is actually pretty fun though. It was pretty cute. You know, it is kind of adolescent storytelling, but it has a lot of really deep cuts for Final Fantasy. I didn't know a lot of them, to be honest with you. I was kind of surprised. I was like, okay, this like joke they keep leaning on is very clearly a joke that's happening, and it's very clearly like referencing something in Final Fantasy VI. But like I have no idea what they're referencing, kind of thing. So it's and, you know, it's been a very long time since I played Final Fantasy VI. So if you're like a big Final Fantasy fan that like really invest in those games and like you remember beat by beat what happens in them, you're probably gonna get a lot of that humor. I got less, so I had to do some like looking up, like, who is this? I don't remember who this is in reference to or why this is like a joke in this game kind of thing. So very hardcore Final Fantasy sense of humor there. However, I think a lot of the delivery and stuff is very fun. Behemoth is like kind of this like delinquent, teenager. That's kind of a fun thing. And I think a lot of the delivery is very good with like the jokes. There is one joke that kind of like goes on a little too long, but it's kind of the point of the joke in some ways. But I think you have to be a very specific type of person to like those story segments, to be honest. And I personally really enjoyed them. But if you don't like that kind of like more kiddie storybook storytelling, I think you'll really be put off by it really quick, unfortunately. I thought the game itself was like really fun though. I personally find it to be a fun like weekend game. I played it Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I think I'm pretty much done with the game. And I'm happy about that. I'm like, this is fine. This is like a good amount of game that I played. I played it like 8 to 12 hours, maybe a little longer than that. But like that is a good amount of game that I want out of a kart racer specifically, right? I don't think this is a great or amazing game, and it's nowhere near Mario Kart. This game does not replace Mario Kart 8, right? In my mind, I don't like Mario Kart as a series. So like it doing enough like different little things is like fine for me. And I don't need it to be like some huge, expansive thing that lasts forever kind of thing.